Okay, so year 11, we're on to video 13 now, which is on opposition. A really important part of our course because it's important to remember that not everybody supported the Nazi regime. So we're going to be looking at opposition towards the Nazi Party today, and we're going to look at 4 different areas of opposition. We're going to look at opposition in terms of youth, so young people and their opposition. We're going to look at religion, or religious people who gave opposition to the Nazis, political opposition, and finally opposition from within the army. So the first one is young people. So when we look at young people, there's 3 groups we're going to look at. 3 groups that opposed the Nazis in terms of young people, and we're going to look at what they did, and then we're going to look at how successful they were. The first group, and probably the most prominent and most famous young opposition to the Nazis, was the Edelweiss Pirates. The Edelweiss Pirates were almost like the polar opposite of the Hitler Youth groups. So whereas the Hitler Youth were going away and on those Nazi-led camps to do fun things, to brainwash and make you feel like being a Nazi was a great thing, the Edelweiss Pirates did everything that the Nazis hated at their own camps. Teenagers going off up into the hills, having their own camps, drinking, smoking, wearing clothes from America, from Britain, listening to music that was banned, having sex, things that the Nazis would have found atrocious. As well as that, they would wait outside Hitler Youth camps and beat members of the Hitler Youth up on the way out to kind of show their opposition, and sometimes got even more forceful. For example, in Cologne, Edelweiss Pirates members actually killed a member of the SS. So they could range from what they did, from simply showing that they didn't want to follow the Nazi rules with their own camps, and then becoming more violent, which was proven from that murder of the SS leader in Cologne. As well as that, let's think about the success of the Edelweiss Pirates. Now obviously we're saying this is what they did and they were showing their opposition, but were they really a threat to the Nazis? Now the Nazis were really brutal at dealing with the Edelweiss Pirates. When they caught members, they would beat them, put them in concentration camps. For example, the members of the Edelweiss Pirates who killed the leader of the SS in Cologne were tortured and then killed. So the Nazis were really, really brutal to the Edelweiss Pirates. And that, for me, says that they were a little bit of a threat. There was this sign that they were worried about the potential threat of the Edelweiss Pirates, or else they wouldn't have been so brutal towards them. However, the sheer fact that Edelweiss Pirates members were put in concentration camps does point us in the direction to say they weren't hugely effective, because once you're in a concentration camp, you can't have the same effect. And it would put fear into a lot of people. So they were a popular group for some teenagers, but we can't say they made any huge, significant differences. The other 2 young groups we're going to look at maybe didn't have as much of a major threat to the Nazis in terms of violence, but were more for the mind, for thinking about trying to make people think differently about the Nazis. So we have the White Rose group, first of all. Set up by Hans and Sophie Scholl. It was a group of university students that found out about the atrocities of the Nazis in the camps and their treatment towards Jewish people, among other things, and publicised those, handing out leaflets on the university campus or secretly handing them out, so going up the top of the stairs, for example, and throwing them down so that people would pick up these leaflets and find out what the Nazis were doing. It was the idea that those intellectuals would share that information and people would follow it and maybe change their mind and show opposition to the Nazis. As a group, those leaflets obviously sent an important message, but were they effective? Hans and Sophie Scholl were both killed for their actions. Once they were silenced, we can see the White Rose group took a very small role then in showing opposition to the Nazis. Final group of young people is the Swing Youth. The Swing Youth simply goes along the lines of they were listening to swing music, and these Swing Youth were basically anti-Nazi in their culture, the actions they took. Clothes they wore, the music they listened to, underground clubs where they could dance to the music they wanted to listen to. Again, showing anti-Nazi ideas. Were they really effective? They're just showing a dislike for the Nazis. They're not actually making a real impact. So young people, ranged in what they did. Did they really make the Nazis change their policies? No. We then look at political opposition. So the Nazis, obviously in 1933 and 1934, establishing that dictatorship, one of the things that Hitler did, if you can remember Panther from some of the videos before, was banning of political parties. And that's simply it. political parties were banned across Nazi Germany. That meant that if you were a member of another political party, you met as a political party, you wrote anti-Nazi slogans supporting different groups, you were put in prison or, more likely, a concentration camp. So political opposition was shown in the way of producing leaflets, writing anti-Nazi propaganda on walls and graffiti, telling jokes, but actually was there any groups that specifically stepped up and showed a threat to the Nazis and made a difference? No. We then look at religious opposition. So religious opposition can take the point of the confessional church. So we have the Reich Church, which was set up, which was the Nazi Christian church. But in opposition to that, Pastor Niemöller set up the confessional church, which was like the protest church, which was going to follow the traditional Protestant views rather than trying to have this mix of Nazism with Protestantism. And Pastor Niemöller would basically run services along with other priests like Dietrich Bonhoeffer. They would run church services where sermons would speak out against the Nazis, and they teach people how to be good Christians rather than good Nazis. Now those services were actually really popular. When we look at the Reich Church and the confessional church, about 2,000 pastors or priests joined the Reich Church to follow the Nazi message. 6,000 joined the confessional church. So it had a big following, their sermons attracted a lot of people, and people would try and follow religious messages as much as they could. So in terms of church opposition, there was an effect there. So Pastor Niemöller, who I said was in terms of the confessional church, two prominent people, religious figures we can look at. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a priest who spoke out against the Nazis, was seen as somebody that was an advocate of Protestantism and Christianity and speaking out against the Nazi views. He actually set up a group that plotted to overthrow Hitler at the start of World War II. He also helped Jewish people escape during the war. But his views eventually got him put in a concentration camp. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was effective in terms of some of the actions he did on a small scale, so the sermons, the letting the Jewish people go away, and his symbolism, so he was used as a bit of a martyr. However, he is put in a concentration camp, which means his voice cannot be spread as far once he's put in that camp. The last religious figure to look at is Bishop Garland, a Catholic priest who promoted and followed the ideas of the Pope, who said that he disagreed with the Nazi way, and Bishop Garland spoke out in many sermons against the Nazis. But here is a fundamental thing: the Nazis were worried about Bishop Garland, so never sent him to a concentration camp. They only put him under house arrest, so we can't have as much of a presence anymore. But we have to remember that actually putting him under house arrest showed that they didn't want to turn Bishop Garland into too much of a martyr and get Catholics against them. So religion was a really tricky subject for the Nazis to deal with in terms of opposition. Arrested figures so that they couldn't get their message across as much, but the fact that they tried to avoid killing people as much as possible shows that there was this real threat of religion. And finally, army opposition, and most famously the July bomb plot. This is where a group of German officers, people involved on the Home Guard, or the equivalent of the Home Guard in Germany, set up a plan to kill Hitler in July 1944. The July bomb plot was led by several people, including Colonel von Stauffenberg, who planned to lay a briefcase next to Hitler at an important meeting at the Wolf's Lair. That briefcase would blow up, Hitler would die, Stauffenberg would return to Berlin, plan into place called Operation Valkyrie, which would put the Home Reserve in charge of Berlin and show that the SS and SA were planning a coup, and they would have to take over the government as an emergency, and that would be a chance for that government to end the war. That's what the July bomb plot was. It was an attempt to end the war. They disagreed with the actions Hitler was taking and the struggles that the German soldiers were facing. Stauffenberg's plan fails when the briefcase is moved after several reports of what actually happened. But the briefcase we do know has been moved so that it explodes. Hitler is left with bruises and cuts, but he does not die. The plan fails. The conspirators are rounded up, killed, and Hitler actually becomes more aggressive towards people within his inner circle that could be a potential threat, which actually shows an ultimate failure of the July bomb plot. So four areas. Young people showed their dislike in many ways, but weren't massively successful, especially when they were arrested. Political opposition had little to no effect after the banning of political parties when Hitler established his dictatorship. We also have religious opposition, which is perhaps one of the most successful in terms of the Nazis were very wary of taking too strict a punishment towards those people who went against the Nazi idea of the right church, and the July bomb plot, which failed after the briefcase did not kill Hitler,